Welcome to our Comprehensive Education Plan, or CEP, training module on setting progress monitoring targets. My name is William Manikis, and I am Senior Director of State Federal Program Implementation and Field Support within the Division of School Leadership. Let's take a look at our objectives for this webinar. First, we'll establish a common understanding of the critical role that progress monitoring plays within the Plan, Do, Study, Act, or PDSA cycle. Next, we'll look at strategies that can help school leadership teams, or SLTs, select key performance indicators that demonstrate how much progress the school is making toward achieving its annual goals. Then, we'll discuss how to monitor the impact of the activities and strategies, as well as how to best use that data to inform updates to your action plans when needed. Chancellor David C. Banks has shared the 4 pillars for building trust in New York City public schools, and these ideas live at the core of all the work we do. The first is reimagining the student experience to help activate students' passion and sense of purpose. Next is scaling, sustaining, and restoring what works. This involves identifying the amazing practices throughout our system and sharing them widely so other schools can adopt the practices. The third is prioritizing wellness and its link to student success. This is a call to support physical safety and mental health and increase our capacity to provide quality mindfulness practices that are scientifically researched, evidence-based, and culturally responsive. The fourth pillar is engaging families as true partners. This requires authentic engagement from the very beginning, and there's no better way to engage families and your school leadership team in the CEP development process than to seek their thoughts, ideas, and opinions as you select progress measures and targets. Your school's thoughts and ideas around the 4 pillars should and will live in your CEP, meaning that all of us must be committed to returning to, studying, and adjusting the CEP so that it becomes the roadmap for school success. When we specifically think about continuous improvement regarding the CEP, we think about 4 steps. First, plan. What are we trying to improve, and what strategies will we take? Second, do. Actually implementing the plan as it was designed. 3. Study. How well are we doing? Monitor both implementation and interim results. Then ask, are we on track to meet our annual goal? And 4th, act. Based on what we've learned, what do we need to adjust in our strategy? The study and act phases of the continuous improvement process highlight the critical role progress monitoring plays within CEP development and implementation. Let's look at where that lives as your SLT develops the CEP. Here is a brief overview of the CEP development process. First, we identify areas of concentration, or AOCs, which are broad topics in which the school wants to improve. They can be in academic areas like English language arts or math, or non-academic areas like chronic absenteeism, or elements of the supportive environment framework. Schools should begin with the areas of concentration that are required for their school level and accountability status. The iPlan portal does this automatically, so schools will see their required AOCs listed, eliminating guesswork. The next step is engaging in a comprehensive needs assessment and root cause analysis, resulting in the identification of priority needs, which will be used in Step 3 to develop SMART goals, and root causes, which will be used to inform the development of progressive action plans. Step 4 is to set progress monitoring targets that will keep the school on track toward achieving its annual goals, which is the primary focus of this webinar. Step 5 is to create progressive action steps that address root causes. Step 6 emphasizes the importance of engaging family and community stakeholders by incorporating strategies that empower families and the larger community. Step 7, which is the final step in CEP development, is to align budgetary resources to each goal, making sure that they're allocated in a way that supports the school achieving its annual goals. At this point in the education planning process, your SLT has developed SMART goals, and so the next logical step is to determine how to best monitor progress toward achieving those goals throughout the school year. This will require the team to select key performance indicators and set progress targets. This slide unpacks some of the key elements of how SLTs can support stakeholder engagement within progress monitoring. SLTs should review progress toward meeting annual goals regularly. Some SLTs will select one or two areas of concentration and goals to progress monitor at each meeting. Others may choose to monitor progress using the progress reporting tool in iPlan at set times during the school year. Regardless of the structure the SLT uses, the key message is that progress should be monitored regularly. Action plans should be revised as appropriate based on the data collected or recommendations from a reviewer or the superintendent. And any revisions to the plan should be shared with all stakeholders. There are 3 basic stages to setting progress measures and targets. First, in order to set meaningful targets, it's critical to use appropriate measures. That is, those that align with the annual SMART goal and provide actionable information for the SLT. Next, determine appropriate targets and check in regularly. This means deciding what progress looks like on the measures you have selected. What target will tell you that the school is on track toward achieving the annual goal? Finally, be sure to check in at the end of each progress monitoring period to ensure that progress monitoring is occurring with fidelity. The second stage involves data analysis, much like what was done during the needs assessment, and self-rating to monitor if progress targets are being met. If they are, consider ways to build out and improve upon the successful activities and strategies. And if not, consider updating the action plan in iPlan in order to achieve the desired results. Let's discuss some of the characteristics of strong measurement tools. They should be easy to implement, not overly time-consuming, and align with the expectation that all schools are formally monitoring progress 3 times a year, while CSI and TSI schools are required to use the progress reporting tool. This remains optional for schools in good standing. They need to be valid and reliable. Do they measure what they were intended to measure? And do we get similar results across administrations? Will they help the school community make decisions and adjustments to their action plans? And lastly, is the administration, scoring, and reporting of data practical? If it's taking 4 to 6 weeks to grade, compile, and package your progress monitoring data for the school, you may want to consider a tool that simplifies the process and provides actionable data in a more timely manner. One of the main objectives of this module is supporting SLTs in the selection of appropriate measures for progress monitoring. Additionally, if you've seen our module on developing SMART goals, this slide may look familiar, but this time we're focusing on suggested appropriate measures for progress monitoring. The suggested appropriate measures represent the input of our appropriate measures working group, which was convened during the pandemic in response to a lack of state assessment data for goal setting and progress monitoring purposes. The suggested appropriate measures for progress monitoring on this slide align to those areas of concentration that are required for elementary and middle schools, namely elementary, middle English language arts, and math. We've also included benchmark assessments, unit assessments, and screener data as potential progress monitoring measures. If you'd like a quick refresher on Step 3, Developing SMART Goals, please see the link at the bottom of this slide. This slide summarizes the suggested appropriate measures for areas of concentration that are applicable across all grade bands. For example, when selecting progress measures that align to SMART goals for the Supportive Environment Framework AOC, SLTs can consider internal, school-created surveys to measure progress toward improving New York City school survey results. In this example, the New York City school survey results are the SMART goal target, and the internal surveys are the progress measure used to check in along the way. This slide also provides suggestions for the quality IEP, chronic absenteeism, and English language proficiency areas of concentration. Our final slide on appropriate measures lists the AOCs that are specific to high schools: graduation rate and its District 75 equivalent, college, career, and civic readiness, CCCR, as well as high school ELA and math. As an example, for graduation rate, the suggested potential progress monitoring measures include mid-year credit accumulation, January Regents or mock Regents exams, scholarship reports, graduation portfolios, and progress to graduation trackers. We want to emphasize that these are suggested appropriate measures, not required appropriate measures, and SLTs should select measures for both annual SMART goals as well as progress monitoring that makes sense given the school's unique situation. We also provide suggestions for CCCR, high school ELA, and high school math on this slide. Once the SLT has selected the measures it will use to track progress, the shift focuses to setting the progress targets themselves. This is a great opportunity for the SLT to define what student success looks like through the development of key performance indicators. Here's an example. If our SMART goal is to improve ELA performance by 3%, from 52% to 55%, as measured by the percentage of students scoring at levels 3 and 4 on the state exam, our progress measures and targets need to be aligned to that goal. Perhaps the school is using the NWEA MAP growth as its screener in ELA and feels that for its population, performance on that assessment is a good predictor of student performance in ELA. Our measurement tool would then be the NWEA MAP growth in ELA. The next question is, what does success look like? For the purposes of our example, let's assume that our school knows from looking at historical data that students who score high average and high on the MAP growth assessment are very likely to score level 3 or 4 on the state exam. That informs the key performance indicator. We'll use students scoring at high average or high on NWEA MAP growth. Our baseline date is going to be May 2022, which is the last time students took the MAP growth assessment in ELA. Again, for the purpose of our example, let's say 50% of students were in the high average or high categories during that May 2022 administration. So that becomes our baseline. The school wants to chart a path to achieving its annual goal of 55% on next year's state exam and wants to include a small cushion, understanding that the NWEA MAP growth screener is not a perfect predictor of state exam performance. So they decide to set targets of 52% for the beginning of year, 54% for the middle of the year, and 57% for the end of year targets. Schools can also reference the reflection questions on this slide to inform their discussions as they choose measurement tools and set progress targets. Progress monitoring is important because it allows you to see where you are against your goal and to make changes based on that information. But what we have found is if we don't plan to progress monitor, it often doesn't happen. It is hard work that takes time and energy, but it is also critical work because it is the foundation of continuous improvement. Studying and learning from successes and discovering the opportunities for improvement. The DOE's expectation is that all schools will monitor progress at least 3 times during the 2022-23 school year. Schools that have been identified for improvement by New York State, Comprehensive Support and Improvement, and Targeted Support and Improvement schools are required to use the progress reporting tool in iPlan. While we consider it to be a best practice for all schools, it will remain optional for schools in good standing. As we shift from planning to monitor progress into the actual process, we want to emphasize that there are several facets to the process. We monitor implementation, that is, how well are we executing the activities, programs, and strategies in the action plan. In addition, we need to collect data in order to monitor the impact those programs, activities, and strategies are having on student outcomes. An approach that capitalizes on both facets and uses the continuous improvement approach to refine the activities and strategies for maximum impact is what we strive for. As you plan to engage in progress monitoring, we'd like to frame this in 3 steps. The first is to take a critical look at implementation of the action plan elements. Remember that the annual goal is the end game, but the steps your school community takes along the way, following the roadmap, that's contained in your action plan. In an activities-based approach, the SLT will analyze each element of the action plan for effectiveness and/or impact and ask questions like, are we doing this with fidelity? Are teams meeting regularly? Are all members attending? Are they using best practices for productive meetings, such as agenda items prepared and shared in advance, established norms, roles for each team member, starting and ending on time, ending with clear next steps? If all of this is going well, great, keep doing what you're doing. But if they aren't, how do we fix it? Does it require a change or update to the action plan within the CEP? Or do we just need to rededicate ourselves and remind everyone of the norms we set out at the beginning of the school year? The next step is to look at impact, and we do that by collecting data, studying the improvement in student outcomes, and demonstrating the impact that implementing your action plan has had for your students. Finally, we're going to look at some strategies and a framework for making updates to your plan based on what you learned from taking that critical look at both implementation and impact and using a continuous improvement approach through the plan, do, study, act cycle. Let's begin by looking at implementation. The first key task is to identify qualitative look-fors for each strategy in our action plan. For example, if we are implementing it well, what should we expect to see, hear, and observe students and teachers doing in the classroom. Next, take those ideas and create an observation protocol that can be used as you collect data regarding the quality of implementation. The third task is to identify the key people, times, and the procedure for collecting your data. Once you've accomplished that, you can establish quantitative look-fors for each strategy. For example, what formative student assessment results or teacher observation data should we expect to see if we're doing this well? Next, we'll talk about how these come together to help SLTs identify trends. Now that we've identified those key indicators or look-fors and identified the key personnel who will be involved, we can schedule data collection and analysis windows. As we know, assigning a specific deadline to an activity is a way to show the entire school community that it matters and generate buy-in from all constituents. Next is gathering of observation and quantitative data. And the final task in assessing implementation is to analyze the data you've collected to establish trends. Are there particular students, classes, or subgroups of students exhibiting similar patterns? Next, we'll shift toward assessing impact. You'll notice that there are some similarities in the key steps for analyzing impact. The first task is to identify the data sources that will be regularly collected. This is critical because we have access to so much data, we need to be sure we're looking at the right data. In looking at the next step, determining indicators and targets for each subgroup, we'll want to be mindful that the indicators we are monitoring are aligned to and good predictors of achieving the overall goal. Once your SLT has landed on the indicators and targets, the steps are similar to what we did for assessing implementation. We'll identify data collection and analysis windows. Again, putting a deadline on the process communicates that it is a priority to the school community. We engage in quantitative impact data collection, and we look for trends or pockets of success to be replicated, or areas of need, which will be addressed in the following step, updating the plan. The final step in the progress monitoring process is to update the action plans as needed. The Plan, Do, Study, Act cycle provides a helpful framework we can follow. We've also highlighted the Act phase of the cycle that relates directly to adjusting your plan based on your progress monitoring data. As you discuss the trends that emerged during data collection with your SLT, consider which activities are being implemented well and are yielding impact. Consider how you can build upon or expand those efforts. It's also important to think about the activities that aren't being implemented as well. Are there opportunities to improve the fidelity of the practice? If those activities were being implemented more efficiently or more consistently, might they yield greater impact for students? Also, if there are strategies or programs that are being implemented with fidelity and just aren't providing the impact the SLT had hoped for, maybe those aren't the best strategies for your students and your school community. Part of revising the plan is also learning from what hasn't worked, moving on, and replacing those strategies with more effective ones. Up to this point in the process, we've reviewed our areas of concentration in Step 1, conducted a comprehensive needs assessment to surface priority needs, analyze data trends, and uncover root causes in Step 2, developed goals in Step 3, and set progress monitoring targets to assess progress along the way in Step 4. The next step in the process is to develop action plans that will outline the specific steps the school is taking to achieve its goals, including strategies that support family and community empowerment, and we will explore those in the next module on Steps 5 and 6. As always, we encourage you to reach out to your Director of State Federal Program Implementation for any questions or to continue the conversation around educational planning. For technical assistance with iPlan, please email iplan@schools.nyc.gov. These links are also included in the description below. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this webinar, and we wish you a successful end to the school year and a productive planning cycle for the 2022-23 school year.